Hello beautiful people, it's Bridget. Welcome back to my channel. Hope you're all having an awesome day. And today we are talking about my least favorite shades out of eyeshadow palettes. Now we all know I have an obsession with eyeshadow palettes. They're my favorite thing in the world. But today we're going to talk about my least favorite shades out of each palette, as well as I'm going to give like a recommendation as like what I would switch it out with. So without any further ado, let's jump into the video. Alright guys, before we get started, I'll make one of this channel is cruelty-free, and so is everything I mentioned in today's video. Also, this is about the palettes. If you do not like the brand or the person who owns the brand, please don't attack me for it. So let's go ahead and get started with number one, which is Jeffree Star Cosmetics Androgyny palette. This is my least favorite Jeffree Star Cosmetics palette, for many reasons, but my least favorite shade out of this palette, which is a very nice color scheme if you think about it, is this shade right here called Poison. It is so patchy. Like, I'm gonna give a finger swatch of it. It looks very good. It's very, very cool tone. But it's just not a good shade. It does not perform well. I don't like it. And it's just extremely patchy on the eyes. Blending it is a pain. The rest of the shades in the palette are better. They're not my favorite in the world, except these top three shades. Like, I love this top row. Other than that, this bottom row is just not the best. I would definitely change this shade out to make it a matte, but not this patchy, dull, like really smoky color. I would make this a much more vibrant turquoise or much more vibrant teal color, because it's so cool tone and it's so patchy. But there's a lot of other cool tones in this palette to draw like a cool look if you wanted to. But I feel like if you had a brighter, more teal, aqua, one of those kind of colors, it would kind of bring the palette to life. You could pair it with some of the brighter colors in this palette and it'd be really fun. But as it is right now, this is just a patchy, dull, uninspiring color, and if you don't put down like a good concealer base first, it washes itself out. So I'm not a fan of this color. I would definitely suggest something more bright, whether it be a shimmer or a matte. I think a matte would be better though. Next up is the palette I used for this little eye look today, which will be on my Instagram tonight if you want to see the little tiny tutorial. And this is the Modern Renaissance palette, which I love dearly, and I'm never going to declutter because it's so freaking good. Like, everybody was talking about this when it came out, and then I haven't seen anybody talk about it lately because it is an older palette. But can we still like older palettes? Is that allowed on the YouTube? I don't know. Modern Renaissance palette is freaking amazing. The only shade I don't like out of this is Real Gar, which is this orange shade, because I feel like for me, there's nothing, I mean, there's things to pair it with in here, but if you pair it with any of like, say these shades or the reds or anything, this just appears darker on the eye than I expected it to. Like, it looks about the same there, but maybe you can tell it's just slightly darker when you swatch it out than it appears in the pan. It has more of a burnt color than you think it does. Like, you think it's a nice bright orange, you can kind of bring a look to life. I just find it appears darker on the eyes, and I would put like a very vibrant orange in here, or literally anything else, because I just feel like this doesn't work. I like the fact that we have these yellowy shades you can build with that orange, but this just gets really dark and muddy really fast, so I would change this out for something brighter. And I promise for every palette, I'm not going to say, just put something brighter in it, because that's such a typical thing for me to say, but yeah, I would just add something a little bit brighter, because this does come off a little bit dark on the eyes. Overall though, the palette's fantastic and I love it very much, even though my favorite shade in here, Buon Fresco, which is this really cool muted shade, does come out darker on the eyes than it's supposed to. I still really like this shade. Something about some Anastasia shadows is they just appear a little bit darker than you expect. So it is Christmas time and I'm allowed to talk about this palette still, even though I feel like I talked about it a lot and we know what shade I don't like out of it. And this is the Gingerbread Spice palette by Too Faced, which I love this palette very much. And if in like a couple weeks you watch this video and it's after Christmas time and you're like, huh, this sounds pretty good, go see if it's on sale, because it's really worth it. The only shade that fails out of this palette is this shade right here, which is called Frostbite Me, and it comes broken to a lot of people. It is just a very gritty, sugary, no pigment behind it. It's just like chunky, gritty glitter in here. It swatches out very pretty, but there is no base color to it. It's just like chunky, gritty glitter. It's not going to be opaque in any manner, no matter how much you swatch it up and try to build on your eye. It's going to be see-through. It's very strange. But this palette as a whole is so good that I can't really fault it. Like, just cover this shade up and I'll be happy. What I would change this out for is for like a really metallic silver. I like the idea of like a white, like glitter shade or topper shade or whatever, but a really beautiful silver would really pop this palette off You could also play up or down like a silver with this hot pink. That'd be so fun. So I would definitely switch out Frostbite Me for a silver shade, kind of like a disco ball silver. Next up is one of my least favorite Juvia's Place palettes, and I'm very sorry to say that, but this is the Saharan palette. The Saharan 2 palette, very good. I've been playing with it recently, very good. Saharan though, I'm not the biggest fan of Saharan, honestly. I'm sorry about it. So this is the Saharan palette. This bright thing is very distracting. It makes it look like it's so much fun, but it's not that fun of a palette, honestly. Like, it has golds, it has oranges, and it's a cute color scheme, and my favorite shade out of here is Fula, which is this really pretty pink shade, which let's swatch because it's beautiful. But my least favorite shade out of this palette is Lulu. I think that's how you say this. Lulu. Because it looks like it's going to be a pretty pinky, peachy kind of shade, but there's absolutely 0 times I've ever reached into it and been happy with it, because I usually go back into another shade and top it off. Something about this shade just seems really uninspiring, and with the other mattes in this palette, which are just oranges, and then these two, it doesn't do anything for me. This does not help this palette whatsoever. Let's give this one a swatch. See? I mean, it could be if you have a deeper complexion than me, it might appear prettier, but to me, it's just super uninspiring of a color, considering we have like golds and deep rich purples and pinks and orange, and like, it's just a really good palette composition. Also, we have the shade Zoya right here, which is very pretty, so having this shade Lulu right here doesn't do anything for me. I can use this one if I want to. I can go towards the more orangey brown, burnt brown, and then you have this like really weird peach. Like, it feels a little bit out of place, and I don't know why, so I would definitely change it out for something definitely peach or a peach matte. Just because I feel like that would go better with some of the oranges and the pinks in this palette. Also, a really peach matte with a gold shimmer sounds really nice, but this shade right here is just kind of uninspiring, so I would change it out for a true peach matte shade. So this is the palette that came out quite a while ago, and everybody bought it when it came out, so don't be mad at me for having it, and this is the Lunar Beauty Life's a Drag palette. This palette quality is very good regardless who owns it. The palette quality is great, except for this one shade, Kiki, which was explained in the release video as being a topper, but it's not a topper. It's a very bad shade. This is a very crappy color right here. It does not perform at all. Like, let's swatch Fishy right here, which is a beautiful, woo! And then we'll swatch Kiki. It swatches way better than it performs, and still look at it. It's not that, it's just, it doesn't show up. You can pack this thing on your eyes. It doesn't want to show up very well. It's just not a good shade. And the rest of the palette is so buttery, so soft, and so nice. And this is like really disappointing to me. What I would like to see in exchange for this color is maybe something more along the lines of a baby blue. Something that would go really well with like the lighter shades and like the neutrals in here, just putting like a little bit of a baby blue. I'll put like a color swatch of like the idea I have on the screen for you, because this, whereas I really like this color scheme for eyeshadow, this does not perform well whatsoever, and it's just really terribly quality. Like, you can tell me this is supposed to be like a very subtle shade, but when all the rest of them here are so good, it means you just know this one's messed up, and it's really messed up. I don't like it at all. But the rest of the shades in this palette are fantastic quality, and I highly would recommend, if you see this on sale and you're okay with supporting the brand, it's a good palette. I feel like people are mad at me now. Alright, next up is a palette that is no longer by the name Makeup Monster Cosmetics. It's Menagerie Cosmetics. I believe that's the name of it. This is the Dragon Child palette. It's a very heavy, nice magnetic palette. Very cute. And then this is the color scheme inside, which you're like, Bridgette, of course you have something this colorful. I did review it a long time ago, but this is the palette itself, and it's very beautiful. The only shade I don't like in here are the purples, and particularly this one, because it comes off really dull, not very purple, not very vibrant, and it's quite patchy. This one's patchy too, but not as bad, but this purple right here I found very patchy, very dry. The rest of the palette's formulation, the rest of the colors, especially this blue, blend so perfectly and so nice. So this is my least favorite because it's just kind of patchy, dull, uninspiring, and I would definitely just suggest putting something else, maybe along the lines of a mauve in here, like a purpley pink color, sort of like my lipstick, like this kind of purpley pinky color, because I think that would go really well with this nice pink shimmer here, as well as like the yellow and the kind of tealy green shade here. I feel like a mauve would fit this palette perfectly, especially because like if you look at the picture of the dragon and stuff, you have this kind of pinky purpley shade, but there's no pink in the palette. And then you look at this and you're like, oh yeah, maybe like a pinky shade could work. So I think a nice mauve would fit perfectly into this palette. And it's a very good palette other than this one shade because I really like it a lot. And it's a very heavy, like heavy duty, luxurious feeling palette. Next up is a palette that I always recommend you guys get because it's so good and I wish it was back forever and not discontinued. This should be permanent. It is the Gwen Stefani palette by Urban Decay. I am very biased by this palette because I have a huge crush on Gwen Stefani. But this palette is so good. And then the one shade, let's see if you can guess which shade I want to change. Can you? No? I want to change one of these mattes, one of these light shades. There's too many of them. I have dipped into this color, which is Skimp the most, as a huge dent in it. And there's fingerprints all over this mirror, so I'm very sorry about that. But I feel like because we have all of these shades that are really similar, we don't need this shade right here, which is Stark, which is a shade I do love. But it's already an existing, like, not in this palette shade. It's just added to this palette. And I find it very uninspiring considering we have these similar colors right here. And then you have this one, and it just feels weird. I like the cool tone brown right here. This one's so easy, Anaheim. And then I like this more zone, like warmer color. But this one just feels out of place. I don't know. I feel like if we have all these, we don't need this shade right here. Like, I like the shade. I put a little bit of a hurting on this one too because I didn't want to run out of this color. But that's what it seems like. It seems like if you don't want to use up these shades right away, you'll dip into this one. But it does nothing for me whatsoever. And keeping true to what I think Gwen would like is a red, like even just a warm burnt red. She doesn't wear red eyeshadow, but because her like a kind of iconic look is like blonde hair, really neutral eye makeup, and a bright red lip, I feel like putting a red right in the center of the palette would be really cool and really edgy. I think it would bring this palette to life instead of looking like a neutral palette with a couple colors in here. I think a bright red or a burnt burgundy red, kind of like this hair color, would bring this palette a little bit more warmth, a little bit more fun to it. Because right now you have in the center focal point of this palette, you have a matte that you kind of have in the top corner already. So it's kind of uninspiring, that one shade. But I do suggest if you see this palette for a good price, pick it up because it's so good and I love it. Yeah, not sponsored, but I really like this palette. And the last palette we're talking about and the shade I would replace is the Naked Cherry palette. There are many things I've talked about I would change about this palette. I still like it though. But the thing I want to change here is this dark color right here. You may be thinking, Bridget, don't you need a shade to deepen up this palette? Yeah, it desperately needs one, honestly. But this shade doesn't do it for me. It's not dark enough. I feel like these two mattes right here come off the same color on the eye, like they appear the same when you apply them. And I like that better than this dark color because it needs to be richer. It's such a cool tone brown that is not helping this palette whatsoever. It needs to be more warm or even darker just to kind of bring this palette together, but it's not that dark. It doesn't appear that dark on the eyes. And it's just kind of muted out. I would love to see it more warm to bring more cherry vibes to this palette. Instead, it just brings like a dusty rose color to the rest of the palette. So if we had something really deep and warm, I think it'd help this palette out a lot because that's what it's missing. It's also missing more cherry shades because right now it's reading as a black cherry palette and not a regular cherry palette. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching today's video. Let me know one palette down below if there's a shade you would change out of it. For me, if I could change any of these palette shades, I would probably change the one from the Lunar Beauty palette because other than that, the palette's really good. It's just that one shade is absolute garbage, and I would rather pop it out and never have to see it again in my life than use it. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching today's video. That sounded very hostile, and I'm sorry about it. I hope you guys have enjoyed your weekend, and I hope to see you tomorrow. Bye!